Sarah Mitchell never imagined she'd find herself standing at the gates of the Iron Ridge Biker Rally, clutching her 8-year-old son's hand, while chrome and leather surrounded them like a fortress of noise and power. 6 months after losing her husband, a Marine who never made it home from his final deployment, she'd promised their son, Danny, one last adventure before the bank took their house. Danny had begged to see the motorcycles, to feel close to his father's memory somehow. But as they stepped into the sea of riders, Sarah felt small, invisible, and utterly alone. Then Danny's balloon slipped from his hand. What happened next would ripple through the rally like thunder. A single red balloon floating toward a weathered rider named Marcus Ghost Callahan, a man who'd spent 15 years trying to forget the promise he'd made to a brother-in-arms named James Mitchell. When Ghost saw the boy's face, saw the familiar gold cross around his neck, something ancient and unspoken awakened in his chest. He didn't know Sarah, he didn't know Danny, but he knew that cross because he'd watched James carve it from shell-casing metal in a Kandahar bunker, whispering a prayer for the son he'd never met. By sunset, 57 bikers would form a wall of loyalty around a widow and her child. By midnight, they'd uncover a conspiracy that had stolen James Mitchell's death benefits, forged documents, and left his family destitute. And by dawn, Ghost would make a choice that would define the rest of his life: honor a promise made in blood, or walk away from the last thread connecting him to the man who'd saved his life. This is a story about the debts we carry, the families we choose, and the sacred vow that transforms strangers into brothers. It's about a balloon, a cross, and the moment 57 engines roared to life, not for a ride, but for a reckoning. The Iron Ridge Biker Rally stretched across 15 acres of sunburned Texas grassland like a cathedral of chrome and exhaust. Sarah Mitchell stood at the chain-link entrance, her hand wrapped tight around her son's smaller fingers, feeling the bass rumble of 1,000 motorcycles vibrate through her chest. The air smelled like gasoline, leather, and freedom, things that used to belong to James, back when he was still alive. Danny tugged her hand, his eyes wide with wonder. "Mom, look at that one." He pointed toward a custom Harley painted midnight blue, flames licking across the fuel tank. The rider, a man with a grey beard braided down to his sternum, nodded at the boy. Danny waved back, grinning for the first time in weeks. Sarah forced a smile, but her chest felt hollow. 6 months. 6 months since the uniformed officers had knocked on her door with words that turned her world into static. "We regret to inform you." 6 months since she'd watched them fold the flag into a triangle and place it in her shaking hands. 6 months since Danny stopped sleeping through the night. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever made a promise that changed everything? The rally was Danny's idea. He'd found a crumpled flyer in James's toolbox, dated 2 years ago, with a note scribbled in his father's handwriting: "Take Danny when he's old enough. Let him see what freedom sounds like." Sarah had cried when she found it, but Danny had looked at her with those same brown eyes James used to have and whispered, "Can we go, Mom? For Dad?" So here they were, 2 weeks before the bank foreclosed on their house. 3 days before Sarah's last unemployment check ran out, standing in a sea of strangers who lived by codes she didn't understand, trying to give her son one good memory before everything fell apart. Danny held a red balloon, $5 from a vendor near the entrance. It bobbed above his head like a tiny sun, the string wrapped around his wrist. He'd insisted on red. "Dad's favorite color," he'd said, and Sarah hadn't had the heart to correct him. James had hated red, but Danny needed to believe something beautiful right now, so she let him. They wandered through rows of motorcycles, each one a sculpture of defiance and precision. Riders nodded as they passed, men and women with road maps etched into their faces, leather vests covered in patches that told stories Sarah couldn't read. Some smiled at Danny. Others just stared. the way people do when they recognize grief, even if they don't know its name. "Mom, can I get closer?" Danny pointed toward a cluster of bikes parked near a makeshift stage where a blues band was setting up. "Stay where I can see you," Sarah said, loosening her grip. Danny darted forward, weaving between chrome and shadow, his balloon trailing behind him like a comet. Sarah followed, her sneakers crunching on gravel, her heart a drumbeat of anxiety. She didn't belong here. These people, they had each other, had their tribes, their patches, their history. She was just a widow with a son and a promise she couldn't afford to keep. Then it happened. A gust of wind, hot and sudden, ripped through the rally grounds. Danny's hand jerked upward. The string slipped free. "No!" Danny's voice cracked, raw and desperate. The red balloon lifted, spinning lazy circles as it climbed above the crowd. Danny lunged after it, but Sarah caught his shoulder, pulling him back before he ran into the path of a rumbling trike. He twisted in her arms, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Dad gave me that balloon," he sobbed, even though he hadn't, even though James had been dead for half a year. Sarah knelt, pulling him close, her own eyes burning. "It's okay, baby. It's just a balloon." But it wasn't. It was the last piece of magic in a world that had gone cold and empty. The balloon drifted higher, a crimson dot against the white-blue sky. Sarah watched it disappear, and something inside her cracked just a little bit more. Then she heard the voice. "Kid." Sarah looked up. A man stood 5 feet away, his shadow falling across them like a wall. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a ponytail and a scar that hooked from his left eyebrow to his jaw. His leather vest was black, worn soft by years of road and weather, covered in patches Sarah didn't recognize. But it was his eyes that stopped her, pale grey, sharp as broken glass, and fixed on the gold cross hanging around Danny's neck. The man's expression shifted. Something flickered behind those eyes. Recognition, maybe, or disbelief. He pointed skyward. "That your balloon?" Danny nodded, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. The man, Ghost, his vest patch red, stared at the red dot still visible against the clouds. Then he turned, scanning the crowd, his jaw tight. He raised 2 fingers to his lips and whistled. Sharp, piercing, the kind of sound that cuts through engine noise and conversation. Heads turned, riders straightened. Within seconds, a dozen bikers had converged around him, their boots crunching gravel in synchronized rhythm. Ghost pointed at the balloon. "Someone get that down." A younger rider, lean, tattooed, maybe 25, grinned. "You serious, Ghost?" "Do I look like I'm joking?" The kid shrugged, swung onto his bike, and kicked it to life. 2 others followed. They roared out of the rally grounds, engines screaming, chasing a red balloon across the Texas sky like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. Sarah stared, speechless. Ghost crouched in front of Danny, his knees popping. "What's your name, son?" "Danny," the boy whispered. "Danny." Ghost's voice softened just a fraction. "Your dad, he a rider?" Danny shook his head. "He was a Marine." The word hit Ghost like a fist. His eyes flicked to the cross again. Gold, hand-carved, unmistakable. Sarah saw his hand twitch toward his own chest, where a similar cross hung beneath his shirt. "What was his name?" Ghost's voice was barely audible now. "James Mitchell," Danny said. Ghost closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "I knew your father." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the man kneeling in front of her son, this stranger named Ghost, with his scarred face and iron eyes, and tried to make sense of the words that had just left his mouth. "I knew your father." "You're lying," Sarah said, her voice sharper than she intended. She pulled Danny closer, instinct overriding reason. "James never mentioned anyone named Ghost." The man stood slowly, his joints creaking, and met her gaze without flinching. "He wouldn't have. We didn't use real names over there." "Over where?" Kandahar, 2009. Ghost reached into his vest and pulled out a battered leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a photograph sealed in plastic. The image was faded, sun-bleached, but unmistakable. 5 Marines in desert fatigues, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning like they owned the world. James stood second from the left, younger, leaner, alive. Ghost stood beside him. Sarah's knees weakened. She'd never seen this photo. James had kept his deployment locked away, in a part of himself he never shared, not even with her. She knew the nightmares, the silences, the way he'd stare at nothing for hours. But she'd never known the faces of the men who'd walked through hell with him. How? Her voice cracked. How did you know him? Ghost slipped the wallet back into his vest. He saved my life. Twice. He glanced down at Danny, then back at Sarah. 3rd time, I wasn't there to return the favor. The words hung in the air like smoke. Danny tugged Ghost's hand. Did you fight bad guys with my dad? Ghost's expression softened in a way Sarah didn't expect, something ancient and wounded flickering behind the hard mask. Yeah, kid, we did. Was he brave? And bravest man I ever knew. Danny smiled, and for the first time since James died, Sarah saw her son's shoulders relax, just a little. A roar of engines cut through the moment. The 3 bikers who'd chased the balloon came skidding back into the rally grounds, dust clouds billowing behind them. The youngest rider hopped off his bike, holding the red balloon like a trophy, its string wrapped around his forearm. Got it, Ghost! He jogged over, grinning, and handed the balloon to Danny. The boy's face lit up. You got it back. Course we did. The rider ruffled Danny's hair. Name's Jax. You ever need something chased down, you just holler. Danny clutched the balloon to his chest, his eyes shining. Thank you. Ghost nodded at Jax, a silent gesture of approval, then turned back to Sarah. Can we talk, just for a minute? Sarah hesitated. Every instinct told her to grab Danny and leave, to walk away from this strange collision of past and present. But the way Ghost looked at her son, like he was seeing a ghost himself, made her pause. Danny, stay right here with Jax, okay? Okay, Mom. Danny was already asking Jax about his bike, his grief momentarily forgotten. Sarah followed Ghost a few steps away, out of earshot. The rally buzzed around them, laughter, engines, the clink of beer bottles, but it all felt distant now, muffled. Ghost crossed his arms, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. James made me promise something, long time ago. What kind of promise? He reached into his vest again and pulled out a small object wrapped in a bandana. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a gold cross, identical to the one Danny wore, suspended on a worn leather cord. Sarah's breath hitched. He made 2 of these, Ghost said quietly, carved them from shell casings during a sandstorm that lasted 3 days. Gave me 1, said the other was for his son. He held it up, the metal catching the sunlight. Told me if anything ever happened to him, I was supposed to find you, make sure you were okay. Then where the hell were you? The words burst out of Sarah before she could stop them, raw and bitter. Where were you 6 months ago when they handed me that flag? Where were you when Danny cried himself to sleep every night? Where were you when I lost my job, my house, everything? Ghost didn't flinch. He just took it, his face carved from stone. I didn't know he was gone, he said finally. I've been off-grid for 2 years, no phone, no address, just the road. He looked down at the cross in his hand. I only found out 3 days ago. Saw his name on a memorial wall in El Paso. Sarah's anger deflated, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. So what now? You show up, tell me you knew my husband, and then what? Ride off into the sunset? No. Ghost's voice was iron. I keep my promise. What does that even mean? It means I'm not leaving until I know you and Danny are safe. He met her eyes, unflinching. James saved my life. Twice. I owe him a debt I can never repay, but I can damn sure try. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to tell him they didn't need charity from a stranger with a motorcycle and a guilty conscience. But the truth was, she had $340 in her bank account, 2 weeks until eviction, and a son who needed stability she couldn't provide. "I don't need a hero," she said quietly. "Good. I'm not one." Ghost pocketed the cross. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Before Sarah could respond, another rider approached. Older, heavy-set, with a grey beard and kind eyes. His vest identified him as Preacher. "Ghost, we got a problem." Preacher's tone was urgent but controlled. "Rachel just pulled some info on James Mitchell's death benefits. You need to see this." Ghost's expression darkened. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves missing money and forged signatures." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Preacher looked at her with something like pity. "Ma'am, your husband's military benefits, the life insurance, the survivor payments, someone's been intercepting them. You should have received over $400,000 by now." The world tilted. Sarah grabbed Ghost's arm to steady herself, her vision swimming. "That's impossible. I was told there were complications with the paperwork, that it would take time to process." "Someone lied to you," Ghost said flatly. He turned to Preacher. "Where's Rachel?" "By the main tent. She's got her laptop." Ghost looked at Sarah, his grey eyes blazing with something cold and dangerous. "You want answers?" Sarah thought of Danny, clutching his red balloon. Thought of the foreclosure notice taped to their front door. Thought of James, who died believing his family would be taken care of. "Yes," she whispered. Ghost nodded once, a promise sealed without words. "Then let's go find out who stole from a dead Marine's family." Watching from the United States? Drop a comment and let us know what state you're from. We love hearing from our viewers across the country. Rachel Cipher Montoya sat cross-legged on a folding chair outside the main tent, her laptop balanced on her knees, 3 external hard drives stacked beside her like a shrine to digital vigilance. She was small, maybe 5'3", with dark hair buzzed on one side and silver rings on every finger. Her leather vest was covered in tech patches, and a single phrase stitched across the back. "I find things people hide." Ghost approached with Sarah and Preacher in tow, Danny still clutching Jax's hand a few yards behind. Cipher didn't look up from her screen. "You're not gonna like this," she said by way of greeting. "I already don't," Ghost replied. "Show me." Cipher spun the laptop around. The screen displayed a document. Official, stamped, dense with legal language. Sarah leaned in, squinting at the text. "This is the Department of Defense death benefit claim, filed in James Mitchell's name," Cipher explained, her voice flat and clinical. "Filed March 15th, 2025. Approved April 2nd. Payment issued April 10th. "I never received any payment," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "That's because it didn't go to you." Cipher clicked to another screen. A bank statement with transaction details highlighted in yellow. The funds were deposited into an account registered to Sarah L. Mitchell at First National Bank in Austin. Same name. Different social security number. Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Someone opened a bank account in my name." "Not just one." Cipher's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up screen after screen. 4 accounts, 3 credit cards, 2 falsified power of attorney documents. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They intercepted your mail, forged your signature, and funneled every cent of James's benefits into accounts you've never touched. "How much?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Cipher met her eyes. $437,000, plus ongoing monthly survivor payments totaling another $23,000 since May. The number hit Sarah like a freight train. She stumbled backward, and Ghost caught her elbow, steadying her. "Who?" Sarah gasped. "Who would do this?" Cipher hesitated, glancing at Ghost. He nodded once, permission to continue. The paperwork traces back to a legal firm in Austin, Daniels and Croft Associates. They specialize in military estate claims. Cypher pulled up another document, a letter on official letterhead. This is the notification you received about delays in processing. It's fake. The signature's forged. The case number doesn't exist in any DoD database. Sarah's hands shook. She remembered that letter, the crisp paper, the professional tone, the apologies for bureaucratic inefficiency. She'd believed every word because she'd been drowning, desperate for any explanation that made sense. "They targeted you," Ghost said quietly. "Someone at that firm saw James's death certificate, saw you were vulnerable, and decided to rob a widow and her kid." "Can we prove it?" Preacher asked. Cypher smirked. "I can prove it 6 ways from Sunday. The question is what you want to do about it." Ghost looked at Sarah. "Your call." Sarah stared at the screen, at the numbers that represented her husband's sacrifice, her son's future, their stolen security. She thought of Danny's nightmares, the eviction notice, the way she'd had to tell her 8-year-old they couldn't afford his asthma medication. "I want them destroyed," she said, her voice cold and certain. Ghost smiled, a sharp, dangerous thing. "Good answer." He turned to the crowd that had begun to gather around Cypher's makeshift command center. Word had spread through the rally like wildfire. Ghost found James Mitchell's family. Someone's been stealing from them. Riders drifted closer, forming a loose circle of leather and chrome, their expressions ranging from curiosity to cold fury. Ghost raised his voice, projecting it across the assembly. "Listen up. Sarah Mitchell is the widow of Sergeant James Mitchell, USMC. He was my brother. He saved my life, and someone's been stealing his death benefits, money meant for his wife and kid." He gestured to Cypher. "We've got proof, we've got names, and we're gonna make this right." A murmur rippled through the crowd, low, dangerous, like thunder building on the horizon. An older rider with a white beard and a Vietnam patch stepped forward. "What do you need, Ghost?" "Witnesses, legal pressure, and a convoy big enough to make sure Sarah walks into that law firm tomorrow morning without anyone trying to make her disappear." The old rider grinned. "You got it." Another voice called out from the back. "How many bikes you need?" Ghost looked at Sarah, then at Danny, still holding his red balloon. "As many as are willing." Hands shot up across the crowd. 20, 30, 50. Within minutes, 57 riders had volunteered, men and women who didn't know James Mitchell, didn't know Sarah or Danny, but knew the code. You don't steal from a warrior's family. Preacher stepped forward, pulling out a battered notebook. "We'll need a route, a plan, and someone who knows the law." "I know someone," Cypher said, already typing. "Former JAG officer. Works out of San Antonio. She owes me a favor." Ghost nodded. "Set it up. We roll at dawn." Sarah watched the organized chaos unfold around her. Riders exchanging phone numbers, mapping routes, checking tire pressure and fuel levels. These strangers, bound by nothing but leather and loyalty, mobilizing like a military unit for a woman and child they'd met an hour ago. She turned to Ghost. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled the gold cross from his pocket and held it up, letting it catch the fading sunlight. "James and I were pinned down in Kandahar. Ambush. 3 of our guys already dead. We were out of ammo, out of time." Ghost's voice was distant, lost in memory. "James had a shot at escape. Narrow window. He could have made it out alone. But he didn't," Sarah said softly. "He came back for me, carried me half a mile with a bullet in his shoulder, told me the whole way I made a promise to go home. Can't do that if I leave you behind." Ghost closed his fist around the cross. "He kept his promise. Now I'm keeping mine." Danny appeared at Sarah's side, tugging her sleeve. Mom, are all these people going to help us? Sarah looked at her son, at his wide eyes and red balloon and the gold cross around his neck, and felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked away since the day James died. Hope. Yeah, baby, she whispered. They're gonna help us. Ghost crouched down, eye level with Danny. You know what your dad used to say? Danny shook his head. He said, a promise made is a debt unpaid. That means when you give someone your word, you keep it, no matter what. Ghost tapped the cross on Danny's chest. Your dad kept every promise he ever made, and tomorrow we're gonna make sure the people who broke theirs pay for it. Danny's small hand reached out, touching the scar on Ghost's face. Were you scared? When my dad saved you. Ghost's jaw tightened, terrified. Are you scared now? The question hung in the air. Ghost looked at Sarah, then back at Danny. Yeah, kid, I am. Why? Because this time I'm the one making the promise, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep it the way your dad did. Danny smiled, bright, trusting, heartbreaking. You will be, 'cause you're my dad's friend. Ghost's eyes glistened. He stood abruptly, turning away, but not before Sarah saw him wipe his face with the back of his hand. Preacher clapped Ghost on the shoulder. We're with you, brother, all the way. Ghost nodded, unable to speak. Sarah stepped forward, placing her hand on his arm. Thank you. He met her eyes. Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow's gonna be hell. Then I guess it's a good thing we've got 57 bikers on our side. Ghost almost smiled. 58. You and Danny ride with me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of amber and crimson, 58 motorcycles formed a circle around Sarah and Danny Mitchell, a fortress of chrome and leather, bound by a promise made in blood and carried forward by strangers who'd become family in the span of a single afternoon. Tomorrow, they would ride for justice. Tonight, they prepared for war. Dawn broke cold and sharp over Austin, Texas. The city was still waking, traffic lights blinking amber, streetlights fading into the gray morning when the convoy rolled into downtown. 58 motorcycles, moving in perfect formation, engines rumbling in synchronized thunder. Ghost led the pack, Sarah sitting behind him, her arms wrapped tight around his waist. Danny rode with Preacher 3 bikes back, the boy's helmet too big, but his grin visible through the visor. The red balloon was tied to Preacher's handlebars, bobbing in the wind like a battle flag. The law firm of Daniels and Croft Associates occupied the 9th floor of a glass and steel tower on Congress Avenue. Expensive, corporate, the kind of place where people in $1,000 suits made money off other people's tragedies. Ghost cut his engine a block away, raising his fist. The convoy stopped as one, a mechanical heartbeat falling silent. Riders dismounted, stretching road-weary limbs, checking phones and radios. Cypher appeared beside Ghost, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. The JAG officers meeting us inside. Her name's Colonel Patricia Hayes, retired. She's already filed a preliminary injunction to freeze all accounts associated with the fraud. Will they comply? Sarah asked, her voice tight with nerves. They don't have a choice, Cypher replied. Hayes has 30 years of military law behind her and a personal hatred for anyone who steals from veterans. She's a shark. Ghost scanned the street. We go in clean, no weapons, no threats. We let the law do its job. And if the law doesn't work? Jax asked, his tone casual but his eyes hard. Then we get creative. Ghost looked at Sarah. You ready? She nodded, though her hands trembled. Let's end this. The convoy moved as a single organism. 58 riders walking across the plaza toward the tower entrance, boots striking concrete in rhythmic unison. People stopped and stared. A security guard at the door reached for his radio. then thought better of it when he saw the sheer number of leather-clad bodies approaching. Ghost stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying. "We're here to see Jonathan Daniels, legal matter." The guard swallowed. "Do you have an appointment?" "We do now." They filed into the lobby, chrome and marble, sterile and cold. An elevator attendant's eyes went wide as rider after rider packed into the car, filling it beyond capacity. 3 trips later, the entire convoy stood on the 9th floor, facing the frosted glass doors of Daniels and Croft Associates. A receptionist, young, polished, already reaching for the phone, froze when Ghost stepped up to her desk. "I need to speak with Jonathan Daniels." "Mr. Daniels is in a meeting." "Not anymore." Ghost leaned forward, his voice dropping to something quiet and lethal. "Tell him Sarah Mitchell is here, and she's brought friends." The receptionist's hand hovered over the phone. She looked past Ghost at the wall of riders filling the reception area, then at Sarah standing beside him, holding Danny's hand. I'll get him." She disappeared down a hallway. 60 seconds later, a man emerged, mid-50s, graying at the temples, expensive suit, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell, I presume." His tone was smooth, condescending. "I'm Jonathan Daniels. How can I help you?" Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You can start by explaining why you've been stealing my husband's death benefits." The smile faltered. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "Yes, you do." Colonel Patricia Hayes appeared from the elevator, military posture, iron-grey hair, a briefcase that looked like it had survived wars. She strode forward, placing herself between Sarah and Daniels. "I'm Colonel Patricia Hayes, and I represent Mrs. Mitchell. We have evidence that your firm has engaged in systematic fraud targeting military widows." Daniels's face went pale. That's a serious accusation." Hayes opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. 4 falsified accounts, forged signatures, intercepted mail, over $460, $000 stolen from a decorated Marine's family. She slapped the folder onto the reception desk. "You have 30 seconds to call your senior partner before I file criminal charges." The lobby went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Daniels looked at the folder, then at Sarah, then at the 58 riders standing behind her like a wall of judgment. There must be some mistake." "No mistake." Cypher stepped forward, pulling out her tablet. "I've got bank records, email correspondence, and security footage of your paralegal, Christine Walker, signing documents with Mrs. Mitchell's name. She's been doing this for 18 months. You want to tell me you had no idea?" Daniels's jaw worked, searching for words that wouldn't come. Ghost moved closer, his voice low enough that only Daniels could hear. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return every cent you stole. You're going to sign a confession, and you're going to tell us who else you've done this to. Because if you don't, these 58 riders are going to make it their personal mission to tell every veteran, every military family, every news outlet in Texas exactly what kind of man you are. Are you threatening me? No." Ghost's smile was ice. "I'm making you a promise, and I always keep my promises." Daniels's eyes darted toward the hallway, looking for escape. There wasn't one. "I want my lawyer." "Good idea." Hayes pulled out her phone. "Because you're gonna need one. I'm filing charges with the district attorney's office in the next 10 minutes. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. You're looking at 15 years minimum." "Wait!" Daniels held up his hands, panic bleeding through the professional veneer. "I can explain." "Then explain." Sarah's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stepped forward past Ghost, past Hayes, until she stood inches from Daniels. "Explain to my son why he had to watch me cry every night. Explain why we lost our house. Explain why I couldn't afford his asthma medication." Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. Explain how you sleep at night knowing you stole from a dead soldier's family. Daniels opened his mouth, closed it. No words came. Danny stepped forward, clutching his red balloon, and looked up at the man who'd stolen his future. My dad was a hero, Danny said quietly. What are you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Daniels crumbled. His shoulders sagged. His face went slack and something behind his eyes just broke. Christine, he whispered. Christine Walker. She brought me the idea. Said there were loopholes in the military benefit system. Said no one would notice. I didn't think. Where is she? Hayes demanded. Office 9C, down the hall. Ghost nodded to Jax and two other riders. They disappeared down the corridor without a word. Hayes pulled out a recorder. Jonathan Daniels, I'm recording this conversation. Do you consent? Yes. Did you knowingly participate in defrauding Sarah Mitchell of her deceased husband's death benefits? A long pause. Then, yes. How many other families have you targeted? Daniels closed his eyes. 12, maybe 15. The lobby erupted. Riders surged forward, voices raised in fury. Ghost raised a hand, stopping them with nothing but a look. Names, Hayes said coldly. I want every name, every case, every dollar. Daniels nodded, defeated. I'll get you the files. You'll do it now. 20 minutes later, Christine Walker, paralegal, thief, architect of the scheme, was escorted out of the office by Jackson Preacher, her wrists zip-tied behind her back. She didn't look at Sarah, didn't look at anyone. Daniels handed Hayes a USB drive. Everything's on here. Account numbers, case files, emails. Hayes pocketed the drive. You're done. The police are on their way. As if on cue, sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah stood in the center of the lobby, Danny at her side, surrounded by 58 riders who'd become her family in less than 24 hours. She felt Ghost's hand on her shoulder, steady, solid, real. It's over, he said quietly. Sarah looked at her son, at his red balloon and brave eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not relief, not yet, but something close. No, she said. It's just beginning. The police arrived in force. 3 squad cars, lights flashing, radios crackling with tense chatter. Lead detective Marcus Rivera stepped out of the first vehicle, his hand resting instinctively on his sidearm until he took in the scene. 58 bikers standing in perfect formation outside the law office, not a single aggressive move among them. Ghost stepped forward, hands visible. Voice calm. Detective, we've got 2 suspects inside and evidence of systematic fraud against military families. Rivera's eyes narrowed. And you are? Marcus Callahan. These are witnesses. Ghost gestured to the convoy behind him. Sarah Mitchell is the primary victim. Her husband was Sergeant James Mitchell, USMC, killed in action. His death benefits were stolen by the law firm upstairs. Rivera's expression shifted from suspicion to something harder. You got proof? Colonel Hayes emerged from the building, briefcase in hand. Detective Rivera. Patricia Hayes, former JAG. I've got bank records, forged documents, and a recorded confession from Jonathan Daniels. Your white-collar crimes unit is going to have a field day. Rivera took the USB drive Hayes offered, his jaw tight. How many victims? At least 15 military families, possibly more. The detective swore under his breath. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, I need backup at 9th and Congress, and get me someone from the DA's office, now. Within an hour, the scene transformed into organized chaos. More police arrived. Federal agents from the DOD Inspector General's office showed up, grim-faced and efficient. News vans circled like sharks, and cameras trained on the convoy of bikers who'd blown open a fraud scheme that had been operating undetected for over a year. Sarah sat on a concrete planter outside the building. Danny nestled against her side, watching as Christine Walker and Jonathan Daniels were led out in handcuffs. Walker kept her head down, silent. Daniels looked broken, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes hollow. A reporter approached, microphone extended. "Mrs. Mitchell, can you tell us what happened here today?" Sarah looked at Ghost. He nodded. "Your choice." She stood, straightening her shoulders. "My husband died serving this country. The people in that building stole his death benefits, money meant to take care of me and my son. They targeted military families because they thought we were too vulnerable to fight back." Her voice strengthened. "They were wrong. How did you discover the fraud?" Sarah gestured to the convoy. "These riders, strangers who became family, they helped me find the truth. They stood with me. They made sure I had a voice." The reporter turned to Ghost. "And you are?" "Someone who owed a debt," Ghost said simply. He placed a hand on Danny's shoulder. "James Mitchell saved my life. Today, we returned the favor." The camera panned across the line of bikers, weathered faces, leather vests, arms crossed in silent solidarity. It was an image that would appear on every news channel in Texas by nightfall and go viral nationwide by morning. Biker convoy exposes fraud scheme targeting military widows. By late afternoon, the police had finished taking statements. Colonel Hayes assured Sarah that the stolen funds would be recovered and returned within weeks, not months. The DA's office was already building a case that would put Daniels and Walker in prison for years. But as the official machinery of justice ground into motion, something else was happening among the convoy. Preacher stood on the hood of a parked truck, addressing the riders. "We've got 14 other families out there who got robbed the same way Sarah did. Some of them probably don't even know it yet." He pulled out a printed list. Names, addresses, phone numbers. "I say we find them. Make sure they get their money back. Make sure they know someone's watching their six." A roar of approval went up from the crowd. Cypher raised her hand. "I can trace the accounts, track down the victims. It'll take time, but we can do it." "Then we do it," Ghost said. His voice carried across the plaza. "We make this right, all of it." One by one, riders stepped forward, volunteering. Some would make phone calls. Others would drive to distant towns, hand-deliver information, sit with families who'd been victimized. It was a promise made collectively, bound by nothing but shared purpose and ironclad loyalty. Sarah watched it unfold, tears streaming down her face. Not from grief this time, but from something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Gratitude. Ghost appeared at her side. "You okay? I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." He looked at Danny, who was showing his red balloon to a cluster of younger riders. "James was my brother. That makes you family." Sarah wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now?" Ghost smiled, small, genuine, almost shy. "Now you get your life back. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Your support means everything." 3 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell stood in front of a small brick house on the outskirts of San Antonio, keys in her trembling hand. It wasn't the home she'd lost. That was gone, sold at auction. But it was theirs, purchased with the recovered funds, 3 bedrooms, a yard big enough for Danny to run in, and a mortgage that wouldn't drown them. Danny stood beside her, clutching a new red balloon, this one bought at the grocery store, not a rally, and grinning so wide Sarah thought his face might split. "Is this really ours, Mom? Really ours?" she whispered. Behind them, a convoy of motorcycles lined the street, not 58 this time, just 7. Ghost, Preacher, Cypher, Jax, and 3 others who'd become constants in their lives over the past weeks. They'd helped with the move, hauled boxes, assembled furniture, and somehow transformed an empty house into a home. Ghost carried the last box inside, labeled James's Things, and set it down gently in the living room. Sarah had finally been able to retrieve her husband's belongings from storage. Things she'd sold or pawned in desperation, now slowly being replaced. "Where do you want this?" Ghost asked. "The bedroom. I'll go through it later." He nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Sarah watched him go. This scarred stranger who'd become something she couldn't quite name, guardian, friend, brother-in-arms, to a man she'd loved and lost. Cypher appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Kitchen set up, preachers hooking up your internet, you'll be live by tonight." "Thank you," Sarah's voice cracked, "for everything. You'd have done the same." "I don't know if I would have." Cypher smiled. "You would? That's why we're here." Danny ran through the house, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, his laughter bouncing off bare walls. He skidded into the living room, breathless. "Mom, there's a tree in the backyard. Can we put a swing on it?" "We'll see, baby." "Ghost says he can help." Sarah looked out the window. Ghost stood in the backyard, hands in his pockets, staring up at a massive oak tree that dominated the space. There was something melancholy in his posture, something distant. She stepped outside, the evening air cool against her skin. "You okay?" He didn't turn around. "James talked about this. The tree, the swing. He said when he got home he was going to build Danny a swing so high the kid could touch the sky." Sarah's throat tightened. He never got the chance. "No." Ghost finally looked at her. "But I can." "You don't have to." "I want to." His voice was firm, almost desperate. "Let me do this. Please." Sarah understood then. This wasn't about a swing. It was about atonement, about carrying a promise forward, about turning grief into something tangible and good. "Okay," she said softly. Ghost nodded, something easing in his expression. "I'll bring the materials tomorrow." They stood in silence, watching Danny chase fireflies across the darkening yard. The house behind them glowed with warm light, Preacher's laughter, Jax's terrible jokes, Cypher's calm voice directing traffic. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Sarah admitted, "like this is too good to be true." "It's not." Ghost's voice was certain. "You fought for this, you earned it." "We earned it. I couldn't have done this without you." He shook his head. "You're stronger than you think. I didn't feel strong. Strength isn't about not being scared. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway." He met her eyes. "You walked into that law firm knowing you might lose. You stood up for your son when the whole world felt like it was collapsing. That's courage." Sarah blinked back tears. "James would have liked you." Ghost smiled, sad, wistful. "He tolerated me. That was enough." Inside, Preacher called out, "Pizza's here!" Danny squealed and raced toward the house. Sarah and Ghost followed, stepping into the warmth of home and family, chosen, earned, forged in fire. They ate on the living room floor, boxes serving as tables, paper plates and plastic cups, 7 bikers and a widow and her son, laughing and telling stories that would become legend among the convoy. Cypher recounted how she'd hacked into the law firm's email server, allegedly. Jax described the look on Daniel's face when he realized he was cornered. Preacher led a toast to James Mitchell, his voice rough with emotion, and Ghost sat beside Danny, teaching the boy how to tie a proper bowline knot. Their heads bent together in concentration. Sarah watched from across the room, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in months. This was what James had wanted. Not just safety or money, but community. People who showed up. People who kept promises. Later, after the pizza was gone and the bikers had said their goodbyes, Sarah tucked Danny into his new bed. He clutched his red balloon, eyes already heavy with sleep. "Mom?" "Yeah, baby." "Do you think Dad knows about Ghost and the bikers and the house?" Sarah brushed hair from his forehead. "I think he knows." "Do you think he's proud of us?" Her eyes burned. I know he is. Danny smiled, drifting off. I'm going to ask Ghost to teach me how to ride a motorcycle when I'm big enough. Sarah laughed through her tears. We'll see. She closed the door softly and found Ghost waiting in the hallway, his jacket on, keys in hand. You heading out? Yeah, got a long ride back to El Paso. Ghost? She hesitated. You don't have to leave. You could stay. There's room. He looked at her for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. I'm not the staying kind, Sarah. Because of James. Because I don't know how to be anything but a ghost. He smiled sadly. But I'll come back to build that swing and whatever else you need. Promise? He pulled the gold cross from his pocket, the one James had made, and pressed it into her palm. A promise made is a debt unpaid. Your husband taught me that. Sarah closed her fingers around the metal, still warm from his body. Thank you. Ghost nodded once, then turned and walked out into the night. She heard his motorcycle roar to life, watched the taillight disappear down the street. But she knew, with absolute certainty, he'd be back. Because that's what family does. They keep their promises. True to his word, Ghost returned 2 days later with a truck bed full of lumber, rope, and hardware. He arrived at dawn, unloading silently in the driveway, refusing Sarah's offer of coffee with a shake of his head and a muttered, "Let me work." Danny pressed his face against the kitchen window, watching with wide eyes as Ghost measured, cut, and assembled with the precision of someone who'd built 100 things with his hands. Preacher showed up an hour later, then Cypher, then Jax. By mid-morning, the backyard had transformed into a construction site. Saws buzzing, hammers ringing, voices calling measurements back and forth. Sarah stood on the back porch, coffee mug warm in her hands, watching this strange family create something from nothing. By afternoon, the swing was finished. It hung from the massive oak tree on thick ropes, the wooden seat sanded smooth and painted fire engine red, Danny's choice. Ghost tested it himself first, his weight making the tree creak but hold. He nodded, satisfied. "Danny!" Sarah called. "Come see!" The boy exploded out of the house, sprinting across the grass, his eyes locked on the swing like it was treasure. He skidded to a stop in front of Ghost. "Can I try it?" Ghost crouched down, eye level with the boy. "Your dad wanted you to have this, wanted you to feel like you could fly." He lifted Danny onto the seat, steadying him. "Hold tight. I'm gonna push you." Danny gripped the ropes, his small knuckles white with excitement. "I'm ready." Ghost stepped back and pushed, gentle at first, then stronger. The swing arced upward, Danny's laughter ringing out like bells. Higher and higher, until it seemed like the boy might actually touch the sky. "I'm flying, Mom. Look!" Sarah laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I see you, baby." Preacher nudged Ghost. "You done good, brother." Ghost said nothing, just watched the boy swing, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. When Danny finally climbed down, breathless, grinning, begging for just one more push, he threw his arms around Ghost's waist. "Thank you. This is the best present ever." Ghost froze, unsure. Then slowly, he hugged the boy back. "Your dad would have built a better one." "I don't think so," Danny said seriously. "This one's perfect." Sarah stepped forward, placing a hand on Ghost's shoulder. "Stay for dinner, please. It's the least I can do." He hesitated, that old instinct to run flickering behind his eyes, but Preacher was already setting up the grill. Cypher was pulling vegetables from the fridge, and Jax was teaching Danny how to throw a football in the yard. "Yeah," Ghost said quietly. "Okay." They ate outside as the sun set, burgers, corn on the cob, potato salad that Cypher had somehow made from scratch. The conversation flowed easy, comfortable, the kind of rhythm that comes from shared purpose and earned trust. Danny sat beside Ghost, peppering him with questions. "Did you know my dad was scared of spiders?" Ghost nearly choked on his beer. James, scared of spiders. Mum says he'd make her kill them. Sarah laughed. It's true, big tough Marine, terrified of Daddy Longlegs. Ghost shook his head, grinning. He never told us that. Did he tell you anything? Danny asked. About me? The table went quiet. Ghost set down his beer, his expression softening. He talked about you all the time, carried your picture in his helmet, showed it to anyone who'd look. Ghost pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos until he found one. Old, grainy, a screenshot of a screenshot. He turned it toward Danny. It was a photo of a photo. James in desert fatigues, kneeling beside his bunk, holding a picture of infant Danny against his chest. His eyes were closed, his lips moving in what might have been prayer. He took this the day before a big mission, Ghost said quietly. Said he needed to remember what he was fighting for. Danny stared at the image, his small face serious. He looked sad. He missed you. Missed your mom, but he was proud, so damn proud. Sarah reached across the table, squeezing Ghost's hand. Thank you for keeping him alive for us. I didn't keep him alive. Ghost's voice cracked. I wasn't there when he needed me. You're here now, Sarah said firmly, and that's what matters. The evening stretched on, stories flowing like water, some funny, some painful, all true. Cypher told Danny about the time she'd hacked into a corrupt sheriff's office and exposed a bribery scheme. Jax recounted a cross-country ride where he'd helped a stranded family change a tire in a thunderstorm. Preacher shared wisdom about chosen family and the roads that lead us home. Danny fell asleep on Ghost's shoulder halfway through dessert, his small body going limp with exhaustion and contentment. Ghost carried him inside without being asked, laying him gently in bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. Sarah followed, pausing in the doorway. He's never slept through the night since James died. Maybe tonight will be different. Ghost looked down at the sleeping boy. He's got his swing now, got something his dad promised him. He's got you, too. Ghost's jaw tightened. I'm not his father. No, but you're keeping his father's memory alive. That matters. They stood in silence for a moment, then returned to the backyard where the others were cleaning up. The swing swayed gently in the breeze, empty but somehow full of promise. We should get going, Preacher said, checking his phone. Long ride tomorrow. But before anyone could leave, Cypher's laptop, never far from her side, chimed with an alert. She frowned, opening it. What is it? Ghost asked. News alert. Federal indictments came down. Daniels and Walker are looking at 20 years minimum. And the DOD Inspector General just announced a nationwide audit of military death benefit claims. She looked up, her eyes bright. They're checking every case filed in the last 5 years because of what we found. Sarah's breath caught. How many families could that help? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. The weight of it settled over them, the ripple effect of one widow's courage, one biker's promise, one convoy's refusal to look away. James would be proud, Ghost said quietly. Sarah touched the gold cross now hanging around her own neck. So would you. Over the next month, Ghost and his convoy became something between myth and movement. Using Cypher's research, they tracked down 14 families who'd been victimized by Daniels and Croft, and discovered 7 more cases linked to copycat schemes in other states. They rode to each home personally. No phones, no emails. Face-to-face conversations, hand-delivered evidence, and the simple message, you're not alone. We've got your back. In Oklahoma, they found Maria Santos, widow of Army Specialist Carlos Santos, living in a trailer with 3 kids and working double shifts at a truck stop. She wept when Cypher showed her the $280, Zoral dollars, that had been stolen and was now being recovered. In New Mexico, they met Robert Chen, father of fallen Navy Lieutenant Grace Chen, who'd been fighting the VA for 2 years over lost paperwork. Ghost sat with him for 6 hours, helping him navigate the bureaucracy, making calls, refusing to leave until the man had answers. In Colorado, they discovered the Johnsons, elderly parents of Marine Corporal David Johnson, who'd nearly lost their home to foreclosure while their son's benefits sat in a fraudulent account in Florida. Preacher and Jax spent a week helping them refinance, organize documents and file claims. Each stop, each family, each story added weight to the mission. Word spread through military communities, online forums, veteran groups, Gold Star family organizations. The convoy that had started with 58 riders in Texas began receiving messages from across the country. Can you help us? Can you check our case? Can you just tell us we're not crazy? Ghost stood in Sarah's kitchen one evening, phone pressed to his ear, talking a widow in Maine through her rights, while Cypher cross-referenced account numbers on 3 different screens. Danny did homework at the table, now accustomed to the organized chaos that had become their lives. "This is getting too big," Ghost said after hanging up. "We can't handle all of this alone." "So we don't," Cypher replied. "We build a network, train other people to spot the red flags, create a database, make it systemic." Sarah looked up from the bills she'd been organizing, her own finances finally stable after years of chaos. "You're talking about starting an organization?" "Something like that," Ghost admitted. "Then do it." Sarah's voice was firm. "James died protecting people. You're doing the same thing, just differently. Don't stop now." Ghost met her eyes, something shifting in his expression, purpose crystallizing into commitment. "Okay," he said. "Let's build something that lasts." Within weeks, they'd established the Iron Promise Foundation, named after James's favorite phrase and the cross he'd carved. Cypher built a website. Preacher handled outreach to veteran organizations. Jax recruited volunteers from biker clubs across 12 states. And Ghost became the face of something he'd never wanted to be, a leader. Sarah served as the foundation's director, her personal story giving credibility and heart to the mission. Danny became their unofficial mascot, his red balloon appearing in every photo, every video, every news segment about the group fighting fraud against military families. The foundation grew faster than any of them expected. Donations poured in, lawyers volunteered pro bono services, accountants offered free audits. Within 6 months, they'd helped recover over $2 million in stolen benefits and assisted 47 families in navigating the labyrinth of military bureaucracy. But success brought scrutiny. One evening, Ghost received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold, professional, threatening. "You're making powerful people very nervous, Mr. Callahan. I'd advise you to back off before someone gets hurt." Ghost's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" The line went dead. He told no one, not Sarah, not Preacher, not even Cypher. But he started checking over his shoulder, varying his routes, sleeping lighter. The threat was real, and he knew it was only a matter of time before whoever he'd angered made their move. The attack came on a Tuesday. Ghost was leaving the Foundation's small office, a converted storefront in San Antonio, when a black SUV pulled up, blocking his motorcycle. 3 men stepped out, professional, armed, their faces hidden behind sunglasses despite the late hour. "Marcus Callahan?" Ghost's hand moved instinctively toward the knife on his belt. "Depends who's asking." "Someone who wants you to understand that certain investigations need to end." "Not gonna happen." The lead man smiled, cold, empty. "Then we have a problem." Before Ghost could react, Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "Federal agents, hands where we can see them." The 3 men spun around. Sarah stood in the office doorway, phone raised and recording, Cypher beside her with a laptop screen showing live video feed broadcasting to multiple platforms. Everything you just said is being streamed to 5,000 viewers, Cypher announced calmly, including the DoD Inspector General's office, the FBI, and about 200 very pissed-off bikers. The lead man's confident expression cracked. He looked at his companions, then back at Ghost. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is," Ghost replied, "because now we know who sent you, and we've got proof." The men retreated to their SUV, engines roaring as they sped away. Within minutes, police arrived, called by viewers watching the live stream. Within hours, the FBI had identified the men as private security contractors hired by a consortium of law firms facing federal investigation. The attempted intimidation backfired spectacularly. News outlets picked up the story. Congressional representatives demanded hearings. The DoD announced expanded protections for whistleblowers and fraud victims. And the Iron Promise Foundation became untouchable. 3 months later, Sarah stood on a small stage at a veterans conference in Dallas, Ghost beside her, Danny holding his ever-present red balloon in the front row. 57 riders, the original convoy, lined the back wall, silent guardians in leather and chrome. "A year ago I was a widow with nothing," Sarah began, her voice steady and strong. "My husband had died serving this country, and the people meant to protect us had stolen everything he'd fought for. I was alone, desperate, and ready to give up." She looked at Ghost. Then a stranger kept a promise, and that promise became a movement. The audience, hundreds of Gold Star families, veterans, advocates, erupted in applause. Sarah raised her hand for quiet. The Iron Promise Foundation has recovered over $8 million in stolen benefits. We've helped 127 families. We've exposed corruption in 17 states. But more importantly, we've proven that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, the people who keep their word, the people who say, "Not on my watch," and mean it. She pulled the gold cross from beneath her shirt. James's cross, now hers. "My husband made this from a shell casing in Afghanistan. He gave one to his brother-in-arms with a simple instruction: keep your promises, no matter what." Danny climbed onto the stage, his balloon bobbing, and took his mother's hand. "This foundation exists because one man kept a promise," Sarah continued. "But it will endure because all of us choose to do the same. For every fallen soldier, for every grieving family, for everyone who's been told they don't matter." Ghost stepped forward, his voice rough with emotion. "James Mitchell saved my life twice in combat. The third time I wasn't there, but I'm here now. And I'll keep showing up, for his family, for your families, for every promise that deserves to be kept." The applause was deafening. Later in the parking lot, Ghost leaned against his motorcycle, Danny beside him, both watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of amber and gold. "Ghost?" Danny asked quietly. "Yeah, kid. Do you think my dad would be proud of us?" Ghost looked at the boy, no longer the terrified 8-year-old clutching a lost balloon, but something stronger, braver, marked by grief, but not broken by it. "I know he would be," Danny smiled. "Good, because I'm proud of you too." Ghost's throat tightened. He pulled the boy into a hug, clumsy, heartfelt, the kind of embrace that says everything words can't. Sarah joined them, wrapping her arms around both. The three of them stood there, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by loyalty, by the simple act of keeping promises. Behind them, 57 engines rumbled to life, a sound like thunder, like home, like the roar of people who refuse to let the fallen be forgotten. The red balloon lifted from Danny's hand, carried by the wind, climbing higher and higher until it disappeared into the endless sky. And somewhere, in whatever place warriors go when their battles are done, James Mitchell smiled, because the promise had been kept. The family was safe, and the road stretched on forever. Thank you for watching this story of loyalty, courage, and promises kept. If this touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Every subscription helps us share more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Drop a comment below telling us what promise you're committed to keeping. We read every single one. Ride safe, friends, until the next story.